episode number 2 of the Fundom Podcast. And for those of you who don't know what the Fundom Podcast is, this is where all fandoms come have fun. I have a very, very special guest today, and her name is Ashaya. She's part of the History of Westeros crew, and she partnered up with me at Dragoncon 2019, and we covered the Expanse, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast. Super excited to discuss our adventures, Ashaya. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I had such a great time at Dragoncon, as I always do, and I was really grateful that you invited me to help cover the Expanse, and I'm stoked to talk about it here today.
Yeah, so today there's no real outline for the podcast. Today we're going to kind of talk about some of our fun experiences with the cosplayers. We had a really sweet interview with Wes and Steven, of course, which is on the channel. And yeah, we're just gonna go over some of the Dragoncon stuff, some of the stuff that was discussed on the panel. You can't really share more than 10 minutes of video or audio footage on the panel, but we're gonna talk about a lot of that stuff today on the podcast, and it's gonna be fun. And yeah, we invite all of you to kind of take part in it today. So Ashaya, what was the one thing that really stood out for you at the Expanse 2019 and at Dragoncon?
Honestly, it was just how many fans of the Expanse are actually new fans of the Expanse. Time and time again, I talked to people who told me, I only discovered this show a month or 2 or 3 months ago, and I binged it all, and I'm here ready to support them. And some of them were in cosplay even. They came hard for the show. So I was very impressed and heartwarmed by that.
Well, next week, we are actually just discussing this before the podcast, doing kind of a little video of some of the photos and some of the video that we got over Dragoncon 2019. There's still some extra stuff I kind of wanted to put on the channel and share with everyone. But one of the things, I mean, there was a Doctor Who line. Wasn't this the first panel on Friday, Shay, I think?
Yes, it was.
And I have never seen a line this big except for the America's Mart on Saturday, which is always bonkers because people want to, go get the awesome kind of one of a kind, awesome things that you'll see in America's Mart, like awesome shields and Viking horns, one that I got, which is awesome, Funko Pops and stuff. But I couldn't believe the huge Expanse line. In the first panel, I think it was pretty much capacity. It was huge.
Yeah, and we started recording. We walked from the beginning of the line to the very end of the line, and it took about 5 minutes to walk from the beginning to end, which is quite impressive.
So we got a video of that. Me and Ashaya have shared that. We kind of got like our own Google Drive of stuff that we've been kind of sending back and forth and talking about what we want to share with all of you awesome people. But yeah, we're gonna put that on the channel next week because it is. And there were so many cool people in the line too. There was people because you were in your jumpsuit, were you not?
Yeah, I do a Sam Rosenberg cosplay, and I love Expanse cosplay in general because you have pockets. It's useful. it's both warm and cool, just useful. But yeah, there are a number of Expanse cosplayers there. There's an Expanse cosplay Facebook group, and generally a community that has come together to organize the photo shoot hours, which they have for other fandoms at Dragoncon, but it's only recently, I mean, there's only 3 seasons of the show out, that there started to be bigger communities at Dragoncon. So I wanted to give a shout out to Cricket and Chuck in the Expanse cosplay Facebook group. Chuck made this awesome banner to hang behind people during the photo shoot hour, which was very cool. And Cricket she organizes this stuff, and it's awesome.
Huge shout out to Chuck Lazarov. Love that guy. Super great energy every time I see him at a convention. He goes to a bunch of different conventions too. He was at Con of Thrones, and he does an amazing Oberyn Martell with his kind of eyes blown out by the mountain. I love it.
He does a lot of cosplay, and at DragonCon, at the Expanse photo shoot hour, he did Admiral Duarte, a character from the Expanse who people haven't seen in the show yet, but it's no spoiler to say there's a character named Admiral Duarte.
Yeah, it's a big character that's coming up in the books. I personally haven't read all the books. I have read Leviathan Wakes. I am getting into the books, and I will be doing actually kind of a little preview. I will be doing Expanse content on the channel. Although I wish it were week to week. It's going to drop all at once, and I'm super excited for that in December. Me and Ashaya have actually talked about doing some of that too when it comes out. Really, really excited for that. But there was really a lot of great cosplay. And just like last year, let's talk about last year a little bit, Ashaya. The energy that we felt from Show Ray and all the people that came cast. I got to meet Dominique and Cass last year. I was lucky enough to chill with them a little bit. And it was the same kind of energy this year. Steven and Wes were so excited to be there. And then we had Chad Coleman and Francois, who was hilarious. I really enjoyed him. But I felt like the energy was like almost similar, if not greater, for this year because more people were into the Expanse like you talked about.
Yeah, I do think that people were particularly hyped up. I would be standing in line or, hearing a conversation going on about it, eavesdropping, I suppose. And I'd hear people be like, oh, yeah, last year they had such and such and such and such, but I wasn't into the show then. And I'm so excited now to see these two and all that. So they were just grateful to be into it with enough time to experience the fandom, I think. So I'm very glad to Amazon for advertising it, honestly.
Let's talk a little bit about experience because Wes is from a part of Atlanta and you could just feel the bubbly energy from him all weekend. We got to meet his wife, Jen, who was super lovely. But Wes, like, he really stood out to me as the person that was kind of the most excited because he's from the Atlanta area. And I felt like he was one of the highlights of the weekend for me, just feeling his energy, how genuinely excited he was to meet all of the fans and of course to talk about season 4 and some of, the things that happened in the past. We got a really, really cool snippet that we got in the interview that was kind of exclusive that we got to talk about. But let's talk a little bit about Wes because I felt like his energy really drove the whole weekend, like his sense of humor and everything.
Yeah, one of the highlights of all the panels for me was him talking about how he would give suggestions for the character Alex for Cass that were things his granddad would say. Yeah. And one of my favorite ones was happy as a pupper with 2 peckers.
Yeah, that was really funny. And I think pretty much everyone erupted at that point.
Right? Yeah, he's a very funny guy, for sure. And so there were so many things that cracked me up, but that one will stay with me.
There was another really funny moment during the interview that I got to, I got to talk about James Holden as kind of like a pseudo Jon Snow in space, and then Wes pipes up as he goes, "Our Jon Snow is more handsome." I thought that, and then Steven turned all red and was laughing. That was pretty funny. So what were some of the other funny moments? Francois was really funny.
Oh yeah, I liked when he was talking about first reading his description in the script, and he reads it and it says, "Little does Avasarala know she's speaking to the devil."
The devil, yeah.
And he's like, it's so taken aback by it in general at the idea of how do you give nuance to a character that's described as the devil. So I mean, it is he was making a serious point, but he just portrays it so humorously. He also said he would like to play Avasarala, as an aside.
Yeah, there was like we got to ask that question in the interview, by the way, where we asked Wes and Steven who they would play if they weren't playing their character. They both answered Miller, which I thought was fantastic. But Francois said Avasarala, and I said, "You'd make a beautiful Avasarala," and that was really funny. But yeah, I found that really interesting. Let's actually talk about Francois and his character a little bit because he talked about, kind of playing these grayer characters, these characters that have these intentions or these rules or things that they think they are doing right. And this was kind of a theme that, was within the panels over the weekend and in the interview too, because Steven talked about it and so did Wes, kind of the decisions that people make, these big decisions that affect humanity as a whole. And Francois kind of talked about that.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's interesting. I mean, we had Wes there, and Amos is one of the few characters that doesn't have a lot of that motivation, that feeling like I'm doing what is right. He takes his cue on what he's doing and whether what he's doing is right from other people. Whereas, I mean, you think about every other character in the show, and I mean, in life in general, they're so guided by their own motivations, I suppose. And that's true of Jules Pierre Mao for sure. But even him, he's doing it for the better good. And in so many cases, people are doing terrible things that they think are for the better good. And sometimes they're just kind of bad things and they think it's for good, on a small scale. Jules Pierre Mao is on a grand scale. And that's true for a lot of these characters. Their effect is greater than the average person here today, but the morality of it rings true, I suppose, for us.
Yeah, Stephen talked about that a little bit too when he had, when James Holden had to make the decision to kill the doctors and all of that, kind of the naivete of some of the characters, the failing forward, and that, but that's what makes these characters great and so intriguing in the Expanses, having to make these difficult decisions, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about this because there was an awesome question that was asked over the weekend that was one of my favorite questions from the panels, that was, what faction would you be a part of? And then, it was really interesting because Wes and Steven both had the same answer. They would be part of the Rocinante crew, right? I thought that was really interesting. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. It's pretty easy to identify with the idea of a found family. I think a lot of people do, but also they themselves in filming the show, and this is one of the reasons among many that they gave, is that it mirrors their own experience. They were talking about how they themselves were thrown, into a situation together, didn't know each other, had to make it work, and all that. So it makes extra sense for them. But I like to think that people in general should strive for that Rocinante sensibility.
One of the things that was brought up too, when this subject was being discussed, was Wes kind of piped up a little bit. And he's like, "So we do our reads together on Sunday," and Steven was like, yeah. So Steven left out some dark chocolate and some nice sparkling water and some coffee, and he kind of lures us in and makes us feel all comfortable and liked. And I really like that moment because I got to poke and jab Wes during the interview a little bit, and they kind of got to discuss how close the crew is, and that unique story that we got to obviously talk about in the interview where Wes had his first child. But you could really feel that vibe last year, Shea, the kind of closeness, the togetherness, the care that goes into each one of these characters, and how passionate they really are about this show.
I mean, how could they not be? I mean, this material is so damn good, to be honest with you. But as well, speaking to their connection, you can also see that on social media. They like to hang out outside of filming, and I like to see that.
Cass has a place in Toronto, I believe. He is part Canadian. I always like to do that because I am Canadian.
Yeah, I know. During our interview, you were like, you made sure to bring up that you're Canadian.
Yeah, because the one question that I did get to ask Wes specifically was, I kind of said, hey, like what was one of the moments that you can kind of behind the scenes share with the fans that is something that not everyone might not know about. And he talked about how they film these scenes in blocks, and Jen was having her first baby, Wes's wife. So I found that really interesting, and he had to stay and then go on a flight from Toronto for 6 hours and not know whether the baby was coming or not. But he talked about specifically the crew and how they were basically and at this point they hadn't been in limbo because of the show too. Like they didn't know whether they were getting another season, and the crew was like waiting there and stuff. Like, no, this was season one.
This was season one, yeah, because it's when he's fixing the antenna with Holden.
Yeah,
Amos and Holden are out there. Yeah,
but he did reference this same crew had been part together for these seasons, and how close they were.
And as anyone can attest to, especially people who know anyone that's a crew member or anything like that, you take the jobs you have when you can have them. You can't sit around for a month without any assurance of a job. It's very unusual for a crew to be willing to do that. So
one
amazing.
thing that was a really interesting moment, and something that kind of struck a chord with me. And the one thing that I did point out to Steven during our interview too. I chimed up when I said, hey, you said crew first. You could definitely tell how down to earth. Really, Wes and Steven were super down to earth, and we were,
Well, hold on. They're not. They don't want to be down to earth necessarily. They want to be the first show to shoot in space.
Let's talk about that, Ashaya. Why don't you fill everyone in on that?
I mean, they were joking about it to a certain extent, and there's a lot of restrictions on how they could do that. But with them now being on Amazon with Jeff Bezos, then, well, it is an interesting idea. I think it would be a brilliant advertising campaign. I think it would. I mean, just think about how many eyes that would bring to the show if they were actually the first show to do that. And I was joking with some people about ways to make that technically true. You really only need to get one of the actors up there, whoever could handle it and pass all of the rigorous examinations and training, who could do it. And then you basically how they can record a feed back to Earth. You could do that. Maybe just one crew member who passes to. Technically, it passes. It's like one scene. Anyways, I think they should do it. They were joking, but I'm 100% on board. Anything to bring more fans.
I don't know. It's so dangerous, just shuttling out to space. I would hate to, there be some sort of accident or something.
Yes, I would too. I think that one is that both Steven and Wes said that they would both want to go to space. So they would be interested in general, but I think Wes or Frankie are probably the
yeah, they're physically fit. They're physically fit.
I think they would pass the most easily.
Steven is very sure of himself. He's confident. He's very intelligent. I mean, he's just so well spoken. But Wes specifically, he's very confident physically and about himself. I feel like mentally he could probably do it as well. I don't know, just a gut feeling. I'm not an expert on who can travel out to space.
He was in the military is part of why I say that as well, in his case. But regardless, Expanse, I guess 2021 will shoot in space. You heard it here.
No, are you seriously making that prediction right now? That's great.
No, I don't think it'll happen, but it would be brilliant if they did. I really think it's not impossible for them to actually do it.
The press behind that would be insane, because that would, that would be worldwide. Everyone would be like, "Oh, this is the first television."
I know. That's why it's the perfect show to do it with, is The Expanse on the perfect network. I mean, they were talking about
covering that. Oh my god, live or some shit, Wes going out to space or some shit.
Yeah, so we have got to do a campaign, another petition. We had hashtag Save the Expanse. Now we have to put, a new campaign for this. We'll get all the fans together.
I'm laughing right now, but I'm totally 100% behind it. I will support anything that Steven and Wes does. Yeah. So what are some other things that really stood out to you at Dragoncon 2019 over the weekend for The Expanse, Shaya?
I definitely liked hearing about their nerdy, interests themselves. They talked about that extensively during their panels. They talked about it a bit during our interview at somewhere like Dragoncon. That's got to come up. In particular, though, I love hearing. I never get tired of hearing just that they've read the books themselves. Obviously, their strategies vary. Wes, for example, doesn't read ahead, and Steven just loves the books and has read them, etc. But knowing that they love that and hearing it reiterated, it's a good feeling.
One thing they also mentioned, Daniel and Ty in the writers' room, they said specifically how lucky they are to have that. And, obviously, James A. Corey, that's Daniel and Ty. That is a super important part of, I think, how The Expanse has grown and why it's been so good. Of course, me and you, Ashaya, we're part of the A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones fandom. There's obviously been this kind of huge conversation about book material not being in the show, and kind of how the past couple seasons have not been as good as the first few seasons. So hopefully
Yeah.
the Expanse can continue that. If Daniel and it looks like Daniel and Ty are going to be there, and I mean that now they have a season 5 as well, which is really exciting. So not only season 4, but greenlit 4 months before the show even comes out, a season 5, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not to say that good book adaptations can't exist without the writers being involved,
Yeah.
but there's something special about having the authors there in the writers' room, not even just like as in Game of Thrones, writing one episode, there working on every episode with knowledge of it and able to tell them, hey, this thing you're writing about in season 1, actually something happens with this in season 8, and so you need to keep it a certain way. Stuff like that goes a long way. So I think we're very, very, very lucky as fans of the Expanse, even Expanse fans who don't read the books and will never read the books. It adds a certain quality to the show, I think.
Stephen and Wes both referenced being able to go speak to Daniel and Ty, like, specifically about things that pertain to their character and, kind of how Daniel and Ty envisioned them in their mind. Stephen really elaborated on that and talked about that at Dragoncon, which I found was, really interesting. Also one thing that really came up with Wes is him reading the churn and kind of them both talking about going to psychologists and kind of talking with psychologists about the psychology behind these characters and really getting that deep into a character. So that is something that is, that is dedication right there. Going to a psychologist, discussing, some of these things that these characters have experienced and trying to give that, behind the scenes, some of the things that, would only kind of be referenced in the books or the churn into the show.
Yeah, I think it is dedication. And it also, it's just good form when you think about the terrible experiences these characters have gone through and the formative experiences. If you want to try to represent that truly and honestly, in some form and not as a caricature of it, it gives it's good for them, for their performance, and it's good, within society, I suppose, for Amos to not be portrayed just as, I don't know, this dumb brute, I suppose, which is how he could be portrayed. But Wes Chatham, he gives him such nuance in the role through his
facial expression, his
dedication to thinking about it, and his amazing actor, both of them. But I think in particular, Amos is a very difficult role to play. So I have to give extra props to Wes among all the actors in the show. To be honest, I think it's a very difficult role to play.
And James Holden being specifically expressive and it was really interesting to hear Stephen talk about, him being kind of like this, proto prophet like character, which I found really interesting. Got to talk about a little bit about the hero's journey in our interview, but he spoke a little bit about, James Holden as a character and kind of what he sees him as during some of the panels as well. It's really exciting. It feels like the Expanse is now a mainstay at Dragoncon. After the first two, like I've been to 3 Dragoncons. Ashaya, you're a little bit more experienced with Dragoncon. You live in Atlanta. I come to Atlanta. I absolutely love Dragoncon. It's my favorite convention just because of how many different fandoms are represented there. But I think it's safe to say the Expanse is now a mainstay at Dragoncon. Like, I don't think they can't not bring more characters back. And, with Stephen and Chad and everyone talking, and Wes talking about how good season 4 is, then that can only bode well for the future of us getting new appearances at Dragoncon.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get both some existing character actors that we haven't seen, in particular Drummer. Love that. But I would love to see some of the new character actors that we're about to see in season 4.
Like Burn Gorman, I think.
Yeah, Burn Gorman is one, and you, Kyle, are about to be introduced to some other major new characters, and I'm very excited to see how they're received, and hopefully they'll bring them around on the press circuit after that.
I heard there's a really interesting female character that's thrust in.
Yeah. There's actually 2 in particular, one of whom is one of my favorite characters in the whole series. The other of whom I think is going to be thrust into a greater role than she maybe was in the books based on the trailer. We'll see. But in particular, one of the POV characters is Elvia Okoye, and Lindy Greenwood is playing her.
Elvia Okoye, yeah, is one I've heard about. Yeah,
and so I'm particularly excited to see more about how they portray her character and all that, because she'll be around a little bit. She's a major character.
Well,
her and Byrne would be great additions, I think.
Well, if you say I'm going to like the character that much, you have great taste in characters. We both have similar favorite characters in the Dark Crystal, which I absolutely love. Which Ashaya is going to actually come back and discuss the Dark Crystal on another podcast, maybe next week or something. I've just finished it up. I loved it. It was actually one of my favorite series that I've seen in a while. Yeah. I thought, everything was great, but this is an Expanse podcast.
Yes. But anyone who likes the Expanse might have some crossover with the Dark Crystal. So if you
But you did see that awesome the awesome Skeksis cosplay.
I did, and it was my favorite cosplay at Dragoncon, was the Skeksis wandering around in the Marriott. Lots of people saw him, actually. So yes, but fair's fair. We're going to talk about the Expanse in our Dark Crystal podcast.
Yes, Chamberlain. Yes. How many did you see? Actually, one more thing. Did you see the video of the person that put all the together with the back?
Yes, all the Chamberlains.
So for those of you, be on the lookout for that coming in the near future.
But yes, back to the Expanse. In general, I love Dragoncon, and I've had such a great time over the years seeing cosplay, seeing friends. But for me personally, it wasn't until the Expanse started coming around, just this past year, that I was going to panels. Because you have to wait in line for panels at Dragoncon, and they're long, and I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy myself and party and all that, but now Dragoncon is way more of a paneling con for me, to be honest.
And I think we've attended every single Expanse panel together, I believe.
Yeah, every single one. Both years they've been here, so all Expanse Dragoncon panels we've been to together.
Expanse panel buddies.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like there's hopefully maybe next year. Maybe there's some fan-led panels or something. That would be kind of cool, getting involved with the sci-fi track or something.
Yeah, they've had Hannah Payne, who wasn't here this year. Last year, she does do Lang Belta, where she teaches, the Belter language. She's been at Worldcon, she's been at Dragoncon. She wasn't here this year, so they didn't have that particular class, that panel. And there was an Expanse fan panel last year. But no, there aren't very many, and I think there were fewer actual panels this year about it, I believe, but I'm not 100% on that.
Because last year we went to that, the fan, I think it was it the Reddit fan meetup?
Well, it was just like the Expanse fan meetup. Some of them were from Reddit, or were moderators there. But yeah, we went to that, and unfortunately it didn't start till much later than it was supposed to. And Dragoncon, you can't wait forever. Other things are happening.
Well, we pulled an all-nighter from the Saturday to Sunday last year at the arcade, and then one at like 9 a.m. That was an early Expanse panel.
Yes.
But the one on Sunday let us recover a little bit from all of our partying and hanging out. It was a little bit later in the day. I think it was like the last panel of the day.
It was like 5. It was perfect after Saturday. Yeah, Saturday night I could stay out late. Yeah, it was great. I mean, every other Expanse day this weekend, this Dragoncon was, just like it was at like 12:30 or something, which is just early enough that you actually do have to wake up significantly earlier to get in that line, because you might be like, 12:30. Well, no, you get in line like 2 hours earlier.
We saw that this year. That was because last year we were like, okay, Expanse is like budding thing that's going to be a drag. People like the Expanse, but this year it was like, oh my, like the lines doubled. It was insane.
Yeah, we did not. The first panel, the reason that we have a 5-minute video of the line is because we didn't realize that the line was going and going and going, and we were just milling about, chatting away. And then we realized that, oh wow, this like goes outside for many blocks.
It was like, I think it was like 3 turns. I don't know, 3 blocks. I don't know. It was,
outside and up the stairs and like back out further outside and around the block and around the block, across the street, it's just like wild.
And then, those people who work those lines, like they got it going on. They got it all organized. It's great. It was just overall Dragoncon 2019. I think that might have been my favorite Dragoncon so far. It was really, really fun. I did feel like there was a lot of work that went into our weekend, attending the panels and doing the interview and stuff like that. So I did.
And beyond panels, taking photos, taking videos, your vlogs and all that. Definitely press is a lot, but so very gratifying and worth it.
Yeah, thank you so much. The whole press crew, the media relations crew, Dan, Carol's, thank you so much. All the people, that helped us over the weekend and really, made it easy for us and just great. And we are super, super thankful for the opportunity to interview Stephen and Wes and getting to hang out with them and getting to know Jen a little bit, Wes's wife. It was just overall a really cool experience. Like, I thought last year was really fun with the Expanse, but this year definitely topped that, and hopefully next year, who knows, the shit, maybe we can even top it, since season 4 is looking like it's going to be a great season of the Expanse.
Yeah, they got to bring a bunch of cast members this year. I really want them to bring the authors also, just FYI. I think that would be great. I
think so too, doing an author panel and maybe doing like a 2-hour panel or something. I don't know. Panels usually run around 50 minutes. They fly by so fast because generally you got, a moderator for the panel, someone, who's there kind of to direct stuff for the actors and actresses, but then also questions from the people that are attending the panel. There were some great questions this year. And one really cute moment too with the older lady. I think it was the last panel on Sunday who said she knew it.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. She knew. Wes's father.
I knew Wes since he was like a little boy or something. It was really cool. They hugged right after the panel. Like, it was super cool to see that kind of connection over the weekend. There was just really, really great love from the fans for the Expanse, but also love back from all the actors. And the boys this year. It was the ladies last year with Cass, and the boys really showed up this year with Chad.
Four of them. Whereas, we had 3 ladies and 1 guy last year. Next year we're gonna have 8 people, 8 Expanse cast members, all of them again. That's what I want.
I highly doubt that.
I do too. You gotta think big.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you the question, what was your number 1 favorite Expanse moment over the weekend from Dragoncon 2019?
Oh, man. I probably am going to say during our interview, Steven's talking about how the whole crew, stopped everything. They stopped, had this breakdown. They couldn't pick up work. They didn't have any work, but they can't stop the work, and so I yelled, "Can't stop the work." And they cracked up.
I really love that.
So that might be a big highlight, is just, make it surprising Wes and Steven and making them laugh. But my other one would just be, seeing the community, seeing the cosplay, the photo shoot hour, the different meetups for that was pretty high for me as well. It's very nice to see. It's heartwarming to see the fans themselves. Actually, relating to the cosplay thing, had already wandered out of the panel hall, and I saw in the Expanse cosplay group afterwards that Wes called a bunch of them over, Cricket and company, and was like, come here, and he pulled them to get a picture with them, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to pick. Like the interview, that was really special. Like I didn't think we were gonna get it, and we got it. That was like just absolutely huge. I'll remember that moment forever. But yeah, I think it was just hanging out. Like Courtney Mata was with us, who was a great help too. We have to give her a shout out.
Oh, yes.
She helped us formulate some awesome questions for the interview. I was just talking to her today. She's absolutely fantastic. Getting to hang out with Courtney and you and attending all the panels is really fun. But I think it just seeing that line and seeing how many people were excited about the Expanse makes me really excited for the future of the Expanse, not just as a show, but at Dragoncon and other conventions. And I just I feel like that was kind of my favorite moment, experiencing all that positive energy from all the fans over the weekend, just knowing that the Expanse will be supported like that going into the future.
I completely agree.
So yeah, this has been a really fun podcast. Is there any kind of other things that you kind of want to bring up, Ashaya, as we're starting to wind down towards the end of the podcast today?
I feel like we're ending it on such a perfect note, but I did appreciate when they were talking about what they've learned from their characters themselves. Like, for example, Wes says that he's now a better listener because Amos is a better listener, and he tries to channel that. And that in general, he wants to feel free of caring about what other people think. Like Amos does that. He doesn't really care about that. And so Wes wants to channel those positive traits from him. And I liked hearing what their analysis was of their characters' better traits, I suppose.
And growing as humans, as real people in life.
Yeah, yes. And for example, Steven, the main trait that he wants to and has taken from Holden is learning how to learn from your mistakes.
Yeah, like failing forward. He talked about failing forward a couple different times, which was really, really interesting. He talked about, Holden being this kind of naive character and, obviously having to go through these very, 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 very big events that change his life, that completely changed the scope of what's about to happen to humanity and in the solar system and the universe. So that's something that's can be incredibly difficult for one person to kind of grasp. But I also did find their answers really interesting and just really like humble. I really like that about them. Yeah. Oh man, I'm really excited for Expanse season 4. I'm gonna actually read all of the books before the season, so I'm gonna get prepped, and I'm gonna be doing Expanse content on the channel. So I'm really excited for that. Me and Ashaya have some discussions to talk about, but we kind of want to team up and do some discussions. I'm going to do some episode reviews, Ashaya. Are you going to be covering the Expanse for season 4 on your channel? Because you do the History of Westeros stuff, and you have done Expanse content in the past.
Yes, that is exactly right. It depends on how quickly we launch a separate channel, how quickly we want to launch covering other fandoms on said separate channel. It's unclear to me. We have, 3 months-ish to do so, but I'm not sure. But regardless of whether I'm covering it separately or not, I will want to be covering it with you because I will want to talk and talk and talk about the Expanse. That will be for sure.
Usually I'm the one that never shuts up about stuff, but it's nice to hear somebody else wants to not shut up about something that I like.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people have told me that they're like, okay, I'm watching The Expanse finally because of you. And then shortly afterwards, they're like, we need to talk about The Expanse. It's amazing.
It does feel like one thing that I do feel is similar to Game of Thrones. I feel like Game of Thrones is the biggest, cooler talk show of all time. I do feel like The Expanse has some of that. Like I do feel the similarities in kind of the passion that people have specifically for The Expanse and Game of Thrones. Yeah,
I actually, we were talking about the Dark Crystal, and even though it's season 1, I see the roots of that for the Dark Crystal. in terms of like people just be like, no, you have to watch it. I know it's puppets, or instead of like, I know it's fantasy, or I know it's sci-fi, as in the channel, not the genre. Unfortunately, like that really was the case, that people were turned off, some of the audience, and some of them just didn't have access to it easily, which is another thing, which was, I know you can't watch it anywhere. Which was a different issue. But anyways, with particularly, I think, genre, TV, and fiction, sometimes it has had more difficulty crossing into the mainstream. But in the last, 10 years or so, that's gotten so different.
But speaking of that, a little plug for the Fundom Podcast, where all fandoms come have fun. This is a place where we're going to talk about not only The Expanse, Dragoncon, Game of Thrones, where there was a new prequel. I'm going to talk about that on my live stream tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, we're going to talk about, like, there's all sorts of awesome shows. I just watched The Dark Crystal. The Witcher is going to be coming out in December. I'm going to cover Vikings with another awesome YouTuber named King McKay. There's all sorts of awesome stuff that you're going to see on the Fundom Podcast within the Azor Hype channel. I also do have a Fundom Podcast Patreon. I want to shout out the first 2 patrons of the channel, Morley and Carrie. Really, really appreciate you guys signing up and supporting that. And there's going to be some bonus content coming up for the Fundom Podcast too. But yeah, tomorrow I'll be recording with Helen. We're going to talk about Star Wars Episode 9. Super excited about that.
Very, very cool. But I have one question.
Yes.
Are you going to have an episode of the Fundom Podcast where you talk about The Bachelor?
No, absolutely not.
They have a fandom. You got to find some fan of The Bachelor and have them on.
Ashaya is throwing me in the deep end here by asking if I'm going to cover The Bachelor.
You're going to piss some people off either way.
Yeah, but this is going to be mainly like Lord of the Rings.
Yes,
I'm going to cover Marvel.
Okay, sure. I'm just telling you. There's fans of The Bachelor. It's a big
bullshit, Ashaya, how you just threw that in there on this podcast.
No, I'm very excited that you and Helen are going to be chatting about Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker.
And then we're going to do an Obi-Wan episode, which is going to be...
cool. I'm so excited for The Mandalorian. We're just in such a great time for TV and movies, period, as nerds in particular.
Yeah, we talked about The Mandalorian in the very first episode of the Fundom Podcast last week. Go watch it, everyone, or I'm unfriending you. Just kidding. Yeah, no, I'm excited for that. Pedro Pascal and Herzog and so many other, John Favreau is at the helm there. That's going to be great too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Ashaya, thank you for joining me on the podcast today, and thank you for being such an awesome teammate at Dragoncon 2019. Hopefully, people will really enjoy this podcast and kind of take something from it. Obviously, we do have our interview that is up with Stephen and Wes that you can go check out. I'll put that in the link in the description of this video. But also, I'm going to put the link to all of Ashaya's social media and what she does. She's an awesome content creator. You should go check her out. And yeah, Ashaya, can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
I do History of Westeros, which is a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to, Game of Thrones, yes, but primarily A Song of Ice and Fire, the book series it's based on. I have covered The Expanse, just season 2. Time is difficult, and Game of Thrones is all-consuming when it's on. So that's a whole thing, but I'm very excited to continue watching it, as the next 2 seasons continue, and I hope to cover it as often as I can. But at the very least, I'll cover it with you, Kyle.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And one thing you're kind of excited about, what's one show that you're excited about before you go that like you're The Mandalorian, is that the one you're excited about?
I am very excited about The Mandalorian coming up, but there's so many shows coming out before then even. I mean, obviously The Expanse. If you'd asked me just a month ago, I would have said The Dark Crystal, but now probably I'm really excited about The Good Place and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia returning. Those are I love comedies as well. I've covered comedies on podcasts too, because in as much as some people might be like, covering a comedy, is that weird? Well, no, because comedies are so dense. Actually, there's so much meta humor that's going on there as it happens. But no, I'd say those 2 shows because they return so soon, the 25th and the 26th of September. So they're very much on my mind.
You guys actually, so one thing that's funny is well, not funny, but I go stay with Aziz and Ashaya and Sean, and then when I'm in Atlanta, they are kind enough to let me stay in their awesome place with their awesome kitties. I miss them. But you guys got me into Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Danny DeVito and all of them just crack me up. Just a great show.
Mm-hmm. And I assume people have seen The Good Place. If you haven't, it is actually, a genre TV show. It's a comedy, but it fits very well with what Kyle could be talking about on the Fundom Podcast. You could be covering The Good Place, Kyle.
You're the one who got me into Broad City, which I absolutely love.
So have you not seen The Good Place yet?
I have. I saw a couple episodes when I was at your place, but I don't remember.
You should go through it and watch it. They're on season 4. The final season starts, and people love it and talk about it, and I think you would love it.
I just think it's like I have a list of so many things that I have to do.
It's like I have to tell you, out of shows for you to watch. If you're gonna watch a new show before, that isn't a new show that's binge all at once, you should be part of the final season of The Good Place because it'll have a lot of people theorizing and all that. It does. Okay, I'm done spieling for The Good Place, but let it be known that I believe both Daniel and Ty like The Good Place. At least one of them does.
Like stuff that the Expanse people like people. If you're listening to the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
This was really fun, Ashaya. I really enjoyed doing this. Hopefully you'll come back on even after I've basically said no about The Good Place for now. You won't be too offended. You guys do have a Patreon as well. They have a great Patreon set up, a great community. I love History of Westeros myself. That's actually how I first knew about Aziz and Ashaya and their team. Great content. And yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast, Ashaya. Hopefully, next year we'll have some great Expanse stuff to cover as well.
Yeah, can't wait.
And like I said, if you do want to support the podcast, you can check it out on Patreon. There will be another episode recorded tomorrow with Helen. We're going to talk all about Star Wars Episode 9. Helen has notes on Emperor Palpatine, like a bunch of them. So we're going to talk about that. But thanks for listening, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the Fundom Podcast. Of course, if you have suggestions of stuff that you would like to be featured on the podcast, let me know in the comments section. I'd love to hear it. Like I said, the Fundom is a place where all fandoms come have fun. I'll see you in the next podcast.